Finance and Services meeting of Wednesday, February the 5th, 2025. This meeting is being convened in person and by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, City of Vancouver's electronic meetings. As such, committee members and the public may participate in person or by electronic means. If a committee member attending by electronic means loses the connection during the voting process, team members are available to get you back online quickly while the voting process is suspended. The team members' contact information has been circulated to you. Video of committee members speaking, presentation, and the vote result will be projected on the live stream when available. Committee members are reminded that, in accordance with Section 14.13 of the Procedure Bylaw, members must enable their video to confirm quorum. In case of an emergency where we need to evacuate the building, I would like to direct your attention to the exits. There are two exits beyond these glass doors and to the left. If the glass doors are obstructed, please direct your attention to the four exits in this council chamber. Please use stairs, do not use the elevator. If you require accessibility assistance, please remain at your location and wait for a security staff member to get you to a safe location. I would like also highlight that there is a defibrillator located at the end of the hallway outside of this council chamber. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded homelands of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. We thank them for having care of this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contribution of City of Vancouver's team members who work hard every single day to help our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor Sim. Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Present.
Councillor Dominato. Councillor Bly. I'm not seeing Councillor Bly. Councillor Fry. Councillor Clausen. Councillor Montague. Councillor Meissner. And Councillor Zhou in the chair. The meeting has quorum. Chair Zhou.
Yeah, thank you, Clerk. This is our plan for the day. Any comments on the agenda item can be sent to Council using the web form on City's website. The link to that form will be posted on X at VanCityClerk. I also want to note City of Vancouver's long-standing commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including utmost respect for all genders. So I remind the committee that when addressing speakers and to the team members, we will avoid using gender honorifics. We will instead refer to the person by first and last name, role, or title. Today we have 4 reports. The committee will recess the meeting and back at noon for lunch. Break at noon for lunch. The committee will reconvene at 3 p.m. to continue to deal with the remainder of the agenda. If needed, committee will recess at 5 p.m. for a dinner break and reconvene at 6 p.m. to complete the agenda. If the meeting does not finish today, we will reconvene next Thursday, February the 6th at 6 p.m. Okay, so now the matters adopted on consent. We will not consider the matter adopted on consent. We have report 3 and 4 on the consent agenda for the committee consideration. We will hold report 1 and 2 to hear from speakers. Okay, committee may adopt the recommendations for report 3 and 4 on consent. Does any member wish to hold any item for debate or question to the team members? Before that, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to disclose? All right, so it was adopted by Councillor Clausen and seconded by Councillor Dominato. So we have report 3 and 4 adopted on consent. Contract award for construction services for Granville Bridge, South Main Approach. Oh, sorry, it's Councillor Kirby-Yung?
Yeah, I have a point of procedure. It was moved and seconded, but we didn't vote on it, so it can't be adopted yet.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm just going too fast. Okay. Let me see. Okay, we have a report. I'll just go back to the number 3. We have report number 3, contract award for construction services for Granville Bridge and the South Main Approach ramps rehabilitation phase 1. And report number 4, contract award for construction services for Killarney Park track and the field civil works for consent approval. And it was adopted by Councillor Claassen and seconded by Councillor Dominado. All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
Opposed say nay. All right, so this motion carries unanimously. All right, the following items has been approved on consent. Number 3, I'm going to read the title again. Contract award for construction services for Granville Bridge, South Main Approach, and ramps rehabilitation, phase 1. And report number 4, contract awards for construction services for Killarney Park track and field civil works. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to go back to the report number 1, childcare strategy implementation and the policy harmonization. Before we begin this agenda item, is if anyone believe they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare. Does anyone have a conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, this item has a presentation, so we have team members here to present this item. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair, Mayor, and Council. My name is Margaret Witkins, and we're pleased to be here today to present an update on progress on implementing Making Strides, Vancouver's childcare strategy.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, there's echo in the chamber, so we probably need something.
That should work, right?
Yeah, it should. Nope.
Just testing again.
Oh, still some echo.
Sound is.
Where's your WebEx?
Sorry.
It's okay. That's word.
That's a good question. Make this. Three, two, one. We're just testing this. That sounds better.
Okay, it's getting better now. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, please go ahead, Margaret. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Margaret Witkins, General Manager, Arts, Culture, Community Services, and we're very pleased to be here today to present an update on progress on implementing Making Strides, Vancouver's childcare strategy. This includes work to progress a number of council directives and motions, most specifically the desire to harmonize the city's childcare policies and guidelines with the province. The work today highlights the complex and sometimes transformative works in progress regarding childcare. We know that access to affordable, quality, and culturally safe childcare is a necessity for healthy, safe, and complete communities. It harnesses critical upstream impacts for children and families and a strong workforce. Vancouver has had many successes and decades history as a leader supporting, investing in, and developing childcare. The work discussed here today demonstrates progress and also highlights ongoing gaps. Much work still remains to be done. Staff have been working across the organization to address council direction and shape the role of the City of Vancouver in supporting a senior government-led affordable childcare system. We have staff here today from ACCS, DBL, REFM, and Law to help answer any questions you might have about this work. To start off, to present a summary of the report and recommendations is the Senior Social Planner in Social Policy and Projects, Mark Pickersgill. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As Margaret said, Mark Pickersgill, Senior Social Planner in Arts, Culture, and Community Services, and I lead the childcare work from that part of the organization. So I'll just give you a very quick summary of the report up front. As Margaret had mentioned, we're here to really report back on some of our progress around Vancouver's childcare strategy and the implementation of that. That includes a number of reports and some of the data that we really want to share with you in terms of our significant progress and significant achievements as a city when it comes to childcare. The second and I think principal piece of the report is focused on design regulations and a recommendation in how we are hoping to move forward. This specifically entails how we're aligning with the province's new childcare design guidelines. And we also have a significant discussion around in-stream applications and how we're dealing with them. And thirdly, we want to really recognize some of the ongoing work, which is not yet complete, but will really, as was noted, can be really transformative for the work that we're doing across the city for childcare. So just to give some very quick upfront context here, we're working in the childcare space right now in a very vastly changed space as compared to a few years ago. We have significant senior government investment, and the commitment to building a universal childcare system is really a huge opportunity and presents a drastic change from where it was, both to improve access and to address inequalities. I have some figures here just in terms of the federal government and some of their investments. Basically in 2021, committing $27.2 billion across the country, and $9.2 billion committed annually as of 2026. As we know, things are shifting in our federal government and will be shifting. In the province of British Columbia, part of this filters down to the province having access to $3.4 billion in federal funding over the next 3 years, basically until 2026, in alignment with the federal government, and the province is investing an additional $2.6 billion in childcare in that same time period. More recent context, so going back to 2018 is really the start of this seismic shift in the childcare landscape, with the province having launched Childcare BC as their plan for universal childcare. 2022, the city adopted Making Strides, our childcare strategy, and up to the present day, where in 2024, Bill C-35 at the federal government established long-term senior government funding commitments to childcare and to building a public system. And the province of BC also, in this past year, adopted new childcare design guidelines for childcare. All of this points to what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is really pointing to our clarified roles for childcare at the City of Vancouver. And I think these 5 points are really important for us to all consider. This is really guiding our work. First is to really be integrating childcare into our planning initiatives. So not seeing it as something that we add on to to childcare, but when we're thinking about housing, we're thinking about planning, engineering, parks, all of these things, we also need to be thinking about childcare. Oops. Second to that is securing land and opportunity for childcare creation, the ability to leverage land and opportunity to create childcare. Connected to that is leveraging senior government funding as well. Fourth being streamlining regulations. And then the fifth is really just to highlight that we are focusing our efforts at the city on trying to decrease the gap for 0 to 5 full-day childcare. So just to highlight some recent motions and council directions over the past years that are really guiding this work and guiding what we're speaking to today. In December 2022, there was the initial motion of harmonizing the City of Vancouver with provincial policies and licensing requirements. In 2023, looking at rapidly deploying childcare and combined with essential worker housing in the City of Vancouver. And last year, I guess the end of the previous year, so about a year ago, really reporting back on the childcare strategy implementation phase 1 and some other resolutions that specifically aim to help explore options for greater flexibility, looking in residential zones as a primary part of that work. So to give you a quick sense of our childcare strategy and our updates, just a quick summary. This is kind of a plan on a page kind of idea. We have 5 broad policy directions in our childcare strategy, 15 key policy goals, 5 early actions, and then embedded within that are components of those early actions. As a really high-level update on that, over 1/3 of all of the actions and components in the childcare strategy have been completed or identified as completed. The remainder are in progress, and there's an additional 5% that we would say are in very early stages or require additional follow-up. So we're well on our way, and we feel that there has been a lot of significant work in this respect. Just to give you, I guess, a sense of the overall landscape in terms of how we're progressing in terms of the number of spaces and really growing childcare at the City of Vancouver. Within the City of Vancouver, approximately 1/3 of all childcare spaces in Vancouver are city facilitated. And that word will come up a number of times in the report, and really want to highlight that for council and everybody out there listening. City facilitated refers to any childcare that is either a facility that the city has an ownership stake in, has a requirement as a condition of development, or that the city has contributed capital funds towards. So in that context, we have about 3,000 new childcare spaces currently in the development pipeline. That number is relatively flexible because some of those numbers may change over time. About 70% of those childcare in the development stream right now are city facilitated in some capacity. They're not all city owned, but city facilitated according to that definition. Anticipated that most of those spaces, those 3,000 spaces, or a majority at least, will be open and operational in the next 3 to 4 years, which is pretty significant. And currently, 800 of the spaces that we have in the development pipeline are funded partially by the MOU that was signed in 2019. And this is, I think, a very telling slide, and I just want to point out, I think, some of the really remarkable achievements of the City of Vancouver in terms of childcare expansion broadly. What this shows is going back to 2018, the light blue color, the number of 0 to 5 childcare spaces in Vancouver. That's the raw number of all kinds of childcare spaces, all kinds of childcare for that age group. Versus 2024, we see about a 2,000 space increase in that time, which is really remarkable. Given that up to 2018, basically that's all time, going up to 4,837 spaces up to that point. So that's almost 40, 50 years. So in that time span over the last 5 to 6 years, we've increased a significant amount of spaces in the city. Again, I would think a strong testament to the work that the City of Vancouver has been doing in all kinds of different capacities to help streamline regulations, working with development and others to, I'm just going to go back here, working with others to developers to create more childcare, and the city taking on more opportunities from senior levels of government to get funding. And then if we look into the future, it's really hard to project those numbers. However, as we said, there was 3,000 spaces or so in the development pipeline. Over the next 4 years or so, we anticipate that about 988 city-facilitated spaces could open in the next 4 years. And this is solely for 0 to 5-year-olds. Progress update, I want to explain a little bit of this. So this is how we are getting closer and closing that gap. So part of our realignment with provincial policies and directions is really recalibrating our target. 59% of childcare, or 59% of people having access to childcare is really that target, and it's a measure that is used by provincial and federal governments as a measure of universal childcare. This basically means that for every child in Vancouver, 59% of those children would have access to childcare. That would be universal. What that means for Vancouver is that that would be about 14,000 spaces if we were to reach that 59% number. Right now, current supply is around 6,839, and we have about 3,000 spaces in the development pipeline. So according to that pretty simple math, that would leave us with a delta going forward of about 4,100 spaces that we would need to close in order to achieve that 59% target. And again, that really signals all types of childcare playing a role, whether that's private, public, family childcare, the full gamut. And the key takeaway from this is that we are on pace, as we look at it, to really close a significant portion of that gap for childcare over the next few years. However, we still need to really seek out more opportunities. At some point, we need to really change the way that we're looking at doing this if we want to be able to accelerate the number of spaces that we want to help create. That brings us to the next portion of the conversation, looking at the childcare design guidelines. So just to give a brief primer and a very high-level primer, the new provincial childcare design guidelines were developed over the last 2 years or so. The City of Vancouver had significant input and influence on those childcare design guidelines, and they were released in 2024. They are a tool to help municipalities, organizations, First Nations with planning childcare facilities and improve the overall quality of all childcare facilities across the province. Currently, these guidelines are not tied to capital funding eligibility. This was a really key point for us, and we understood that that was going to be a part of the creation of these guidelines. However, that door is not closed. They may ultimately still be tied to eligibility in the future. However, the ministry is still going to provide additional guidance in the future as to both how they might be tied to funding and how they might be, I guess you could say, administered ultimately, or expected to be administered. That brings us to the recommendation that we're bringing forward to you, just to give, again, a brief highlight or a brief overview of how we are bringing these recommendations for you, is that we're asking to endorse the province's new provincial guidelines for childcare facilities. Underneath that, what we're saying and what we're asking is that for new city-owned childcares, the provincial childcare design guidelines will replace the City of Vancouver childcare design guidelines. For new private childcares, the new provincial childcare design guidelines will not apply. And that for all childcare, and this is not really a change in any way, but for all childcare applications, they must continue to meet mandatory provincial childcare licensing requirements. And you'll see the little asterisks. Part of this is that we had to consider what to do with in-stream applications. And the recommendation is that we'll be asking them to continue to be subject to the current City of Childcare design guidelines, and that anything after the date of potential approval, we would be going with this new strategy just mentioned. So this is kind of a visual breakdown of what that looks like, all of the different things that apply in these two major streams of childcare, private childcare and city-owned or public childcare. Currently, the childcare design guidelines do apply to both streams. And in the city-owned public childcare, we also have the city technical childcare design guidelines, which apply to city-owned facilities. In the future, the proposal is to basically strip away the City of Vancouver's childcare design guidelines for city-owned public facilities, we would be replacing those with with the provincial childcare design guidelines in not so much a regulatory way. That's going to be left up to the provincial piece. And then also the COV technical guidelines, again, being led by REFM. Application of these guidelines, as we note here, we don't know for sure, but we have to do a lot more work ultimately in terms of figuring out how that's all going to be implemented. But the expectation is that there may be some overall area reductions and yield cost savings for city projects. So to talk about in-stream applications, the approach that we're taking is that we are, as noted in one of the recommendations, is that for everything after the date of a potential approval, the new practice would be applying. But for everything in-stream, the recommendation is for the existing childcare design guidelines to be applied. The reasoning behind this is that overall there are minor differences between the Vancouver and the provincial childcare design guidelines. And for the sake of administrative simplicity, this is by far the most consistent and fair way that we would be able to apply this, and ultimately had determined that there won't be a significant impact in doing it this way. We have a table here that kind of just breaks down really high level like what some of those differences are in terms of indoor and outdoor space, but overall, if we take a bird's eye view of this, the differences between provincial childcare design guidelines and the city's current childcare design guidelines are relatively minor. And then really kind of bringing us to the last of all of this is just, again, a bird's eye view on some of our ongoing work. And these are really in response to a number of motions that have been brought forward by council. As we've talked about before, and at council and through a number of memos and conversations, really looking at childcare and residential zones to find opportunities for flexibility. This has been a really complex piece of work. Ultimately, we're at the stage of analysis in terms of options, and we have, as I would say, a broad staff group, come to a few potential options. We still have some consequential review to do of those, but the plan is to be able to bring potential bylaw amendments and changes to our policies in a fully formed fashion to council at some point in 2025. Again, we're still working with planning and DBL to find out how we can resource all of this and finding all of the pieces that ultimately need to be done. But again, promises to be a shift that should help us overall in being able to open up more opportunity for childcare in Vancouver broadly. And then the second one here is a really exciting piece of work, and again, one of those transformative pieces. We have been undertaking some ongoing work to identify perhaps under-identified or under the radar, maybe is the right word, publicly owned sites to deliver childcare quickly using prefabricated construction or modular childcare. This is really an effort to help address inequities in the sense that we can target land really wherever we can across the city and ideally target underserved areas such as the south parts and east parts of Vancouver. And the ultimate goal here is to be able to utilize provincial and senior government funding to help us build childcare on city land. And we have ultimately provided put in an application to the province for a significant childcare in the south of Vancouver. We're still waiting to hear back as to the results of that application, but that is the first in what is hoped to be many. Currently, we have 5 other sites that are shortlisted for further exploration. We hope to, in these next few months, perhaps take that another step further to see if these could be ultimately sites that we could do a similar type of thing where we leverage senior government funding, open up land, and create purpose-built childcare, hopefully in quickly deployable fashion and hopefully in a way that is very cost-effective. So I will ultimately leave it there, but just to highlight, this is the rundown of our council directions. And as was noted by by Margaret. We have myself and other staff here to help answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Thanks for the presentation. So committee members, you have up to 5 minutes to ask questions of team members. Are there any questions? Councillor Meisner, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark, for the presentation and the update. You mentioned that if we were to approve the harmonization with the provincial childcare guidelines, that in-stream projects would still be subject to the City of Vancouver guidelines. Do you have a rough idea of how many in-stream projects there are?
Yes, we have 24 in-stream projects currently.
Okay. And was there any consideration or thought given to maybe offering them the option of which guidelines they would like to proceed with?
Yeah, we did definitely look at that option. I think the way that we're ultimately going, though, in terms of endorsing the guidelines, that particular direction would make it a little bit less consistent ultimately. And I'm trying to think of the most effective way to describe it, but in the way that we are intending to apply the guidelines, it's slightly removed from the development permitting process.
Mhm.
So that's a bit of a change. And we were just worried about potentially changing existing agreements and didn't really see there being much of an opportunity or really much of an appetite for changing in-stream plans already.
Okay.
Noting that ultimately the difference is going to be relatively minor, no matter which way we swing it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that background information. Other question was around, I guess, the history. Like, what was the rationale for the city having its own guidelines? Did the provincial guidelines not exist in, I think it was 1993?
1993, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the rationale for the city to have its own guidelines?
Yeah, absolutely. The main rationale was ultimately for the city of Vancouver because we were experiencing at that time a pretty big boom in terms of development. And there was a supreme lack of senior government involvement and investment in childcare. Mm-hmm. It was a way to ultimately ensure that there would be a level of quality built into these facilities. Looking specifically at areas like downtown, mm-hmm. They were research and evidence driven based on healthy outcomes for children. Ultimately, that was the kind of the main driver. A secondary driver for this was, again, to build in this new some of these new processes around development to make sure, again, we could have consistency and give clear and just very clear advice to applicants, to developers, to architects on how we expect facilities to be built.
Okay. But is there a thought now that the provincial guidelines are good enough?
Well, so again, there's that distinction between the provincial guidelines and the provincial regulations. Provincial regulations, for the most part, are not in any way design-centric. Mm-hmm. They are performance measures at the end of the day, whereas guidelines tend to be more design-centric mm-hmm. in the sense that they provide, again, guidance to achieve those ultimate regulatory outcomes.
Okay. Yeah.
They're meant to promote optimization ultimately.
Okay. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Carbiel?
Thanks, Chair. Can I move for a second round?
Yeah, we need a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Montague. All those in favor say yea. Opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. Please go ahead.
Okay, I have a number of questions. I'll try to go through them fairly quickly, and thank you for a very comprehensive presentation. My first one is in terms of the work that's being done looking at residential zones, and you said that's still underway, it's fairly complex. When you mention residential and opening up opportunities, can you clarify if that thinking does not include converting whole houses? I'm asking the questions I'm concerned about converting badly needed housing stock, which often has secondary suites or other opportunities into full houses kind of becoming commercial ventures in residential zones and losing housing stock. So can you confirm if that's something that's on or off the table?
It absolutely is something that's on the table. Currently, we do have, there's that opportunity to convert full residential homes into childcare. Again, we hope to provide more clarity as to how that could be done, but absolutely, and without getting into the fine details, because again, much of this still needs to be worked out, we're really looking at two major threads. One being being able to kind of manage this idea of having mixed use, residential and a commercial level childcare on a site. That's one piece that we're looking at. The other piece is how laneway houses would fold into that as well.
Okay, I'll be interested to hear more about that, but that concerns me with the intersection on housing. My next one is around similarly in the future work, and you mentioned potentially identifying city sites for using modular prefabricated childcare. Again, in the thinking there, are you considering the intersection between the provision of childcare, much needed amenity, and tying up city-owned sites that could be intensified for higher use that could include residential and childcare, for example, versus a low density use like a modular childcare?
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. In terms of our search, we have also been in regular and consistent contact with our non-market housing group who to look for similar opportunities, and those in particular, those sites and those opportunities would be looking at intensifying uses to add housing and childcare. I think really for the purposes of this childcare search, we're looking at opportunities where childcare could be the purpose-built and sole use on the site, and in that sense, not trying to take away from opportunities for housing. So if anything, we'd be looking at more unidentified marginal sites to be able to transform into childcare options.
So either intensifying uses or marginal sites, but intensifying uses not like when we put temporary modular housing in, or we tie that up for years versus delivering more homes. So more of an intensification philosophy?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Going on to the next one, and I want to talk a bit about the outdoor space in the downtown core. It was interesting to see that chart when you talked about the parity with the provincial and the current city guidelines around how much outdoor space is required. It's often said, well, we require more in Vancouver, and that is part of what limits our ability to site them. I'm wondering how you see aligning with the province. Will it have any positive impact on the downtown core? And I'm asking this as Vancouver's, or as the province's most populous city. What we're hearing is a lot of people want childcare downtown. They want it close to their work. It's important in bringing people back to work in the economy. But the challenge is there are spaces potentially within buildings. There might be a park nearby. Maybe there's a rooftop, but we can't site the outdoor space in the traditional way. And so downtown has been identified as a particular challenge. So can you comment on how any of this work could support getting more childcare into downtown?
Absolutely. We have been in contact, and we've done some work and some presentations with the Vancouver Downtown Business Improvement Association, and we're going to be continuing that work into the new year. That's really part of, I think, what we're trying to do is to come together with provincial health and licensing, with the downtown business community, and with us to kind of find solutions and opportunities. I think really to directly answer your question, I don't think what we're doing here is going to particularly impact that. We understand that there are, let's look at the downtown core, which we can extend really down to the Broadway corridor, the central core of Vancouver.
I guess the question is, I can come back on, but I'll see the question is,
Sure.
Can we do something differently to recognize those populous areas where childcare might be different site?
Yeah, and that's what we're looking to do with all, as I said, those players involved, is to see what we can do to really support more childcare in the downtown core.
We're out of time, so we have second round, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Klassen.
Mark, and to the team for this work. I'm really pleased to see that it responds to council direction that has been brought over the last couple of years. I want to first of all just talk about this opportunity with our modular building, that the one that we were in discussions with the province. I want to maybe get a little bit of a further update on the status of that project.
Sure.
In the Champlain Heights area.
So first, I just want to thank Mayor and the Mayor's office for recent advocacy to the province on behalf of that project, just to see where things stand and to see if there will be a decision made. The advice that we received back is that we're not likely to hear back for probably a few more weeks until March. There's some connection to the provincial budget ultimately before they make announcements, not just in our project, obviously, but any of their projects that they look to fund. However, as I understand it, there's been written and verbal expression of excitement about the potential opportunity that we're showing here to be able to utilize space for modular deployment. Something that the province is quite excited about, and we're optimistic that it will also prove to be a really cost-effective way to be able to deliver childcare.
Excellent. And that's about over 100, potentially 100, over 100 spaces
Correct.
in one of our so-called childcare deserts in Southeast Vancouver.
Yeah.
That's great. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some more progress on that and our relationship with the province on that one. Can I just ask you about our relationship with Coastal Health as sort of who help us kind of co-regulate and enforce the requirements of this? How has it been we just recently, a number of councillors just met with Coastal Health last week. How are they adapting to some of the proposed approaches that we're taking here?
I think that's a really good question, and I think we're still in the we have to figure it out kind of mode ultimately. That being said, at the end of the day, provincial licensing is the regulatory authority when it comes to childcare. I think what we are doing here and what we're one of the intentions in trying to align with the province also has to do with looking out for the city's interests and what we're investing in. We want to make sure that we're getting what we pay for effectively. And I mean, how we pay for it is many different ways, but so that's one part of it. And really what we want to do is to be synchronous ultimately with provincial licensing. We don't want to throw up barriers. And conversely, I think they don't want to be putting challenges back onto the city ultimately in terms of, I keep using the word barriers, but conversely, we're trying to overcome those barriers at the same time. Now, how we're going to do all that within this new context, we actually just had a meeting yesterday with licensing around what this could potentially mean in terms of our processes. And we're going to be spending some time over the next weeks and months making sure that we're lined up.
I know you were somewhat loath to get into too much around the residential-based childcare, but what what are the things that we could do to sort of balance community concerns around traffic as we expand childcare into some residential areas?
Yeah, I think that might be, I don't know if Andrew, if you are open to talking about that.
Just to repeat the question, just what kind of things are we doing? Oh, so Andrew's not coming up?
Okay, so I can try.
No worries, no worries.
Again, with the residential piece, residential childcare, we absolutely are looking at the overall community impacts. At the end of the day, we do still have ingrained into our processes like various public feedback mechanisms, et cetera. But in alignment with things like the parking bylaw, which we recently moved childcare into the parking bylaw, we're looking at still further amending and making changes so that it will both work for the opportunity to create more childcare, but we also are very seriously looking at neighborhood impacts.
Okay.
It's an ongoing conversation. Is probably how I again say it. It's important for us to do both of those things: create opportunity and make sure that we're not disrupting neighborhoods.
And to that end, I'm pleased to see that we're at least opening that door and trying to see what we can do about it. And I think part of the measures include access to transit, for example, that sort of. I'm running out of time, so I'll probably save my next questions for when I come back on the queue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Damnado, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the update and presentation. Yeah, a couple of questions. Just circling back to the new provincial childcare design guidelines. You noted that there's relatively small differences. You referenced the indoor-outdoor space, square meters, square footage. Can you comment, is there any other significant changes or differences in the guidelines that are noteworthy that we should be aware of? And I bring it up in the context of we've had a number of letters come in with concerns of sort of watering down and that aligning with the province is potentially harmful. Or so if you could just comment on that, like beyond what you've noted in the presentation, is there anything of note?
I think that in general, I would say no, nothing of what I would say is significant. again, if anybody's interested out there, that if you want to read into the report and the appendices, we did a pretty complex and very lengthy analysis of the differences between the two. But in general, there's not anything that we would deem to be significant. The only thing that I would say is, in terms of content, but what is significant is the way the provincial guidelines identifies guidelines versus considerations. Considerations not having necessarily the same weight. And some of the things that you might want to have as those guidelines, higher level, are embedded in considerations. And, I think it works both ways. And like some things positive, some things negative in terms of how they're played out. But yeah, overall, I don't believe that there's anything significant beyond some of the like the area considerations, which is probably the most significant.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then just circling back to the slide, this is slide 14, around applicability, administering new guidelines and applicability to private childcares versus city-owned public childcares. The private childcares, that would include some of the larger group cares, but also home-based, family-based cares that, that are up to like 7 children. Could you just expand on that and
Yep.
how many we're talking about roughly? Because I think you said the majority are city-owned or operator connected.
Yeah, so it always depends on which way you slice it, but really, so anything that is outside of city ownership or control, we're saying that we're not applying. The city is not applying the provincial guidelines, and we will still have some involvement in terms of the overall regulatory context, in terms of getting your development permits and making sure that the building permits, et cetera, are all taken care of. But really, it is a much more streamlined approach, and it impacts all childcare, all down the line. When it comes to family childcare, that's a bit of a different question, though, just because there is some legislation. I think we had written a memo back in the late summer that really identified, or maybe it was early summer, I don't even remember. It all blurs together at this point, but identifies that there's legislation that says that 8 space or less. The city has no legal position to implore that there be development permits or anything like that. So family childcare is what falls into that category. So we're not putting anything on family childcare in that context. But for the group centers, again, that's a scaling back in terms of the city's input into their ultimately to get to the point where they get a licensed childcare.
Right. But still, as noted, the licensing regulation around life and safety still applies to provincial.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's critically important for families. I just wanted to segue back to one of the directions was around looking at the residential component, because we had a number of instances of operators who are already operating family-based care in homes and wanting to expand that to include the whole home or the laneway or a combination. So I just wanted to reflect back. What I think I heard was that indeed is on the table, is looking at that is potentially change of use in those residential areas to enable childcare closer to where people live. Because what I hear often is that families can't find childcare near where they live. They're having to drive, they're having to go like across town to another neighborhood. And so we're actually pushing people into vehicles or into even other municipalities. So that is on the table, is to look at those options, including the laneways.
Yes, absolutely. And just to refer back to Councillor Klassen, it is also looking at those neighborhood impacts, and that's part of the analysis of how this is all unfolding, but absolutely.
Okay. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I do have a couple of questions here. Thanks, Mark, for the presentation. Very comprehensive, very informative. My first question is, last Friday, most of council members, we met with Vancouver Coastal Health. Lack of childcare space is still a biggest concern for our healthcare system, which leads to a long wait time and also the nursing shortage. So my question to you is, what we have done, what is our plan to work with our frontline health workers or other first responders to increase the childcare space for our first responders?
I think a very good question. At current time, we don't necessarily have any policy or anything like that that is purely supporting or to the idea of supporting first responders, et cetera. I mean, it is a piece of work that we could look at doing. It's a really tough thing, as I'm sure you can all imagine, in terms of having a pretty critical shortage of childcare broadly. The idea of kind of hiving off and giving priority to certain sectors is always a bit of a challenge to really navigate. But I mean, we're open to talking about some opportunities to be able to have some policy to see how we could, how the city might impact creating opportunity for first responders and people in the frontline occupations.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, so I would really encourage our team to think about something creative to make sure there's fairness to other professions, but also prioritize our first responders in some way. Okay, the other question is, I think you mentioned that the provincial target is 59% of children have access to full-time childcare. So what happened to the remaining 41%?
Good question. The remaining 41%. So again, this is not necessarily something that our team and our work had identified, but the general understanding is not every family and every child is going to need or want childcare. There's obviously families that might have extended family members that can take care of kids, et cetera. So it really is a reflection of that universal need is not a one-for-one for childcare, but there's a bit of a balance ultimately.
Okay, do we know how do they come up with this 59%? Why not 60%? Why not 55%?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's the exact number. I mean, if we want to be a little bit more broad, I would agree. Like we should just say 60%. It seems to make some sense. But yeah, it's relatively arbitrary in terms of why they stuck with 59 and why that is there.
Okay, thanks. My next question is, in some areas in the city of Vancouver, they are in a larger shortage of the childcare space. Like I remember Run for Rupert, I think only 29% of the childcare needs has been met. So no wonder I live in the area, no wonder I wait for almost 2 years for a childcare space. So what is our strategy to solve specific areas in the city in terms of the gaps of the childcare space?
Yeah, like I had noted, traditionally we've been really focused on development opportunities as being the key to unlocking more childcare. But we know that those are things are changing ultimately in how we're looking at development. We have new housing targets, et cetera. Making sure that funding is all aligned and all of those things can be very, very complex business. And we may not be able to surgically target areas that we need. So what I had mentioned in terms of our work in identifying city sites throughout neighborhoods in Vancouver to be able to ideally quickly deploy childcare, I think we see that as being a really key tool. And right now we're still in the very early stages of looking at opportunities, but if we can figure out a way to do this that's effective and especially cost effective, then that could really be a key for us going forward. And this means looking at things like unutilized road right-of-ways, sites that are not ideal for higher intensity housing development, potentially working with our Parks Board to see if there's opportunities for basically childcare spaces. There's lots of different things that we're exploring, but also private sites that are where we have willing partners to develop childcare on those sites.
Okay, thank you. Another very quick question for the in-stream application. So if they pull out their application, apply again, do they apply for the City of Vancouver design guidelines or only the provincial guidelines?
Okay, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Okay, I'll come back later, so I'm running out of time. Yeah, thanks. Councillor Kirby, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to just give you a bit of space because I ran out of time on my last question, and that was around the downtown piece. And you said that you were to cite, or Broadway plan to cite childcare in the more populous areas, and you said you were engaging with stakeholders like Downtown Van. Just to be clear, are you expecting that you're going to be able to bring anything forward in the upcoming recommendations that will specifically address some of the space constraints in those areas?
I can't say with any conclusive, anything conclusive. I can't say that we will, but again, I think what this is a broader conversation, because at the end of the day, I think what we're trying to ascertain is how we can work with our, particularly licensing, to unlock opportunity as best we can. We're not trying, from the city perspective, we're not going to be trying to hold us to a really impossible standard in the downtown, for example. But so I mean, I'm not answering your question in the most direct way. I think that there really, as I said, still conversations to be had.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad those conversations are happening. Two more questions for me, my last two. And the first one, in terms of the harmonizing, do we have the ability to sort of do a case study or two, how much time and money it might save to open a childcare facility in Vancouver after we have harmonized the guidelines versus the current sort of made in Vancouver additional requirements today?
I would say that's work that we still need to do, and that we're intending to have that kind of analysis going forward.
Okay. That's great. And then my last question is, you had a great slide that showed the more significant investments now federally and provincially by senior levels of government under which childcare jurisdiction sort of squarely falls. And then you talked about how the city can still be a good partner and enable, whether it's provision of land, requiring them as conditions of development, contributions, or capital contribution. Do you have a sense, I think we've seen this in previous reports, we'd like to know, can we start including what the city has contributed to date and put into childcare? And I'm thinking about the ability for us to show what a good partner we've been, how much we have put in, and then our ability to also now redirect those funds towards some of our aging infrastructure now that the senior governments are picking up their responsibility.
Yes, so we're actually in the very early stages of pulling together some, I guess, talking points and negotiation points with the province to basically bring that forward. It is absolutely a key piece to be able to address the aging infrastructure. And I mean, when we look at the amount that the city has brought forward, contributing to the creation of childcare spaces, like the number of assets that we own as a city, it's more than the rest of the entire province combined. It's pretty staggering, and there is absolutely a need for more support from senior levels of government to be able to maintain those assets. So I would say that absolutely it's going to be part of our upcoming conversations with the province and negotiations.
Okay, I'm really happy to hear that because I think it's important to show how much Vancouver's contributed. Did I hear you correctly that you said there are more spaces for childcare that are owned by City of Vancouver than in the rest of the province combined, owned by the province?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at all of the, I mean, this is a really difficult thing to quantify, but because you have smaller communities that may only have like one or two childcare centers, and one of them is in a community center. I think if you factor those things out, through development, for example, we have, I think, I don't remember how many facilities we have off the top of my head, but I think it's something like 38 the city has ownership of. It's, I mean, there's no other municipality that comes anywhere close. And I think if you do tally all of those up in terms of how they have been captured through development, yeah, we at the City of Vancouver have created more childcare that way than anywhere else in the province combined.
Okay, I really look forward to having some of that information. It would be really great to have some of that information specifically articulated in this really great presentation. But I think if those messages can be included, I would be very interested to see that reiterated.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Claassen?
Thanks very much, Chair. Just following up now on our discussion. With regards to some of the in-kind contributions we're receiving from the development community, are developers, the projects coming forward generally showing willingness to incorporate childcare in their spaces? And do we have a strategy to continue to incentivize that?
Yeah, I can say, I mean, I might turn to some of my other colleagues as well, but in general, I think we see a general willingness to incorporate childcare. I mean, we have seen a pretty steady flow of in-kind projects come to the city over the last couple of years. And we've even seen in the Broadway plan, for example, a number of private facilities kind of come up to the table. Now, as to whether or not they get to the finish line, that's kind of not up to us. But the ones that we ultimately intend to own, yeah, we've seen a pretty steady trickle. It hasn't really been an argument per se. I think there has been the willingness, provided that there is obviously a benefit for a developer, whether that's extra density or some other concession. That's usually the trade-off that we have to make. And yeah, I think that as much as we can do that way, it is a high value for the city to continue to do that. And I know we're open to it, but yes, we understand that it's going to be ebbs and flows. Development conditions are changing. So
The report indicates that the conversations are in very early stages with the Downtown Vancouver Association and looking at that downtown piece. What specific barriers currently exist? Can you give me sort of the short version of that, that make it hard for creating new spaces in the downtown core?
yeah, well, downtown core first of all, there's a lot of office space. Office space itself is not necessarily ideally suited to incorporating childcare, if only because it's difficult to get any outdoor space. It's not even the amount, it's really any outdoor space. And yeah, I think that's ultimately the biggest barrier. Because there is available real estate, but is it suitable? So outdoor space plus, again, suitability. If you're talking about outdoor space, that's potentially, just in a busy like downtown plaza, that's probably going to be a real challenge, even if you can secure the space, just because of safety concerns, et cetera. But yeah, those two things, it's really suitability and outdoor space.
And to be clear, what we heard from the Downtown Vancouver Association when this was raised with us last year was that this is really a key piece for their kind of back to office, incentivizing people to come back to work in the downtown core, which we know has sort of downstream support for local businesses and eateries, and just making sure that businesses run better. Are there other plans that we could do to incentivize employers or commercial property owners to provide childcare in these developments?
Yeah, I think that, again, I keep saying that these are open discussions, and we're hoping to find out if there's things that the city might be able to do to help incentivize. That will be part of some of our discussions, I would hope. But for the most part, I can say right now, what we're really trying to say, and part of what this report is doing in terms of scaling back the guidelines and applying to private childcare, for example, is to really remove as many barriers as possible. But we ultimately do need to work with licensing to get a licensable, suitable space. And maybe there's some things the city can do. We could still explore. I mean, I have things in mind. I'm not going to say them right now, but if we want to talk after, and they're really high level ideas. But there's definitely things that we could start talking about.
Great. I'll make remarks later on, but I really appreciate the creativity that we're applying to this important file. And again, as other people have said, this has traditionally not been something, a social service that cities or it would be in their sort of mandate, but we know that it's a critical piece for the success of communities and for our economy here as well. That's why we need to play a part. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. I just have one more last question, Mark. So for the in-stream applications, so they will be still subject to the City of Vancouver's childcare guideline, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so what happens if they cancel their application and apply it again? Do they still apply to the City of Vancouver? Yeah.
So if they cancel their application, then the application would be after this date, assuming again that this was approved. So it would be subject to the provincial childcare guidelines. If it's a city-owned childcare, and now if we're talking about a private applicant, that's a different story.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. That's all. Thanks for the clarification. That's all my question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So we will now hear from the registered speaker for this report. Public speakers should state whether they are in support or in opposition of these recommendations and may only speak once. I will also ask speakers if they are residents of Vancouver if it is not noted on the speakers list. Our first registered speaker is Nasma Lee member of Women's Advisory Committee, City of Vancouver. Is Nazma here? Okay, please go ahead, Nazma. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nazma Lee, and I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Women's Advisory Committee in support of the motions before Council today, but also generally in support of the important work the city is doing to enhance access to childcare. Lack of access to childcare disproportionately affects women. On January 7th, the Women's Advisory Committee passed a motion recommending that the city reaffirm its commitment to the goal of universal childcare by endorsing $10 a day and directing staff to continue to take various actions to advance this goal. Being a weekday morning, it would be challenging for working parents to pack the room today, but I can assure you that the lack of childcare contributes significantly to Vancouver's reputation as a city inhospitable to young families. Stable childcare is life-changing, and I can say this without exaggeration because of the impact it has had on me professionally and personally. In 2012, my husband and I were desperate to secure childcare before my return to work. I still remember the fateful day I received a call from the Mount Pleasant Community Center down the street that they had a spot for my little son. I cried. I had literally won the lottery. My kids thrived in that environment, and I thrived professionally. Fast forward a dozen years, and my youngest child still benefits from after-school care at her daycare sister facility. Childcare is a key reason why we have decided to stay in the city despite the high housing costs. Conversely, I recently had a conversation with a fellow lawyer at my office. She's expecting her second child, lives downtown, and is seriously considering a move out of the city because of a hopeless multi-year search for childcare. It should not be a matter of luck or lottery for families to secure childcare in their neighborhood. Like public education, childcare is essential social infrastructure. It is not a commodity. While there will continue to be a role for the private sector, not-for-profit and public childcare programs deliver stability and the high-quality, sustainable public infrastructure to support universal access to childcare. The provincial design guidelines, for which staff seek endorsement today, support the development of these types of multi-generational facilities within a public system, and the city will be well-positioned to capitalize on unprecedented funding and policy convergence among senior levels of government. To close, I want to thank and recognize the passion of city staff and their commitment to this important work, because again, it is life-changing. I urge the city to continue to show leadership, to be innovative, and to center childcare in planning discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nazma. Thanks. Okay, speaker. The next speaker has withdrawn, so we're going to go to the second speaker, Sharon Gregson, spokesperson for Coalition of Childcare Advocates of BC. Is Sharon online? Hey,
yes, I am.
Sharon, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. It's always a tough role to follow Nazma as a speaker. I want to thank Chairperson Cho and Mayor Sim and the councillors for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sharon Gregson. I'm a Vancouver resident. I've been involved in the Vancouver early learning childcare sector as a parent, a two-term elected school board trustee, an operator of licensed childcare programs for children 0 to 12, and a spokesperson for the Coalition of Childcare Advocates. I also sit on the Childcare Council of Vancouver alongside Councillor Cho. I'm one of the women who created the $10 a day childcare plan back in 2011 and have watched it spread from Vancouver across BC and now across Canada. I have local, provincial, and national expertise on childcare issues, and I speak in favor of the recommendations from staff today. I thank each of you for your commitment, obviously from the questions you've raised so far today, to continue the decades-long leadership of Vancouver City Councils of every political stripe in recognizing the value of quality, affordable childcare to our city. You know, as Nazma well described, that childcare programs allow parents, especially mothers, to go to work and for children and our economy to thrive. As you'll see from the report before you today, Vancouver's childcare policies have supported the creation of approximately 16,000 licensed spaces. And as Mark described, another 3,000 in the pipeline and 1,000 of those slated to open in the next 2 years. These are significant numbers. And as councillors, you can be proud of the quality licensed childcare environments children in this city are growing up in. Sadly, that same pride cannot be shared by your colleagues throughout Metro Vancouver. It's important to note that Vancouver, both through city staff expertise and councils with vision, have achieved these thousands of childcare spaces in high-quality programs, even though senior levels of government have only recently come to the table with more substantial capital and operating funding. We all know that there are still waiting lists for childcare, and I hear almost daily from families who are struggling. Truthfully, there are waiting lists for quality licensed childcare in every community, in every part of this province, and across this country. Vancouver's design guidelines did not create waiting lists. Waiting lists are the result of senior levels of government not starting their investments into building a childcare system decades ago. I understand that this council prefers to harmonize childcare design guidelines with the province rather than have Vancouver-specific guidelines. And so I urge you, please, to vote yes to harmonize with the new provincial design guidelines. And ideally, all childcare in the city would have access to the same quality programs as described in the guidelines. How you vote today will have a direct impact on the quality of life of young children growing up in our city. So I thank you for voting yes and for caring about the children, about gender equity, healthy communities, and a thriving economy. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Sharon. Really good to hear from you, and thank you for your advocacy these many years. Thank you. Okay, so this is the end of our speakers list. Thanks everyone for speaking to the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services. Would someone like to move a motion? Moved by Councillor Claassen, seconded by Councillor Dominado. Committee members, is there any discussion? I saw Councillor Kirby-Yung. Please go ahead. Oops. Sorry, we just lost you. Okay.
Are we good?
Just give us 1 second, Councillor Kirby-Yung. Okay, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Chair. First of all, I want to thank staff for a really comprehensive presentation and make a couple observations that it's while we still have a shortage of childcare spaces in the city of Vancouver compared to the need, and I think the delta was identified at 4,000 spaces, it is, and you know, if you're the one parent that's trying to find that and that's impacting your ability to go back to work in your daily life, it doesn't really matter that Vancouver is punching above its weight, but I do think it's worth noting how significantly Vancouver has participated in this space. I also want to say that we have done that in order to support the greater cause. I'm really happy to see the federal and provincial government stepping up because we have unattended priorities such as our aging infrastructure, renewing those community centers, which ironically can also help provide more childcare spaces and all of our other core infrastructure. So I think that needs to be noted. A few observations, and that is really around the downtown, and I'd referenced if there's a park nearby or a rooftop or something that could be utilized, but our city is growing and continuing to intensify, and I think that that is a question we really need to grapple with, which in order to continue to provide those spaces is going to require, I think, potentially some real conversations around relaxing the requirement for outdoor space or how it gets delivered and looking at some flexibility around that piece, because that's an issue that's not going to go away in downtown. And the economy, as I mentioned earlier, really depends on it in terms of people wanting to return to work, the small businesses around there and so on. And we do have a surplus of office space, and we can potentially look at creative and adaptive reuse of that. The other thing I'll say too is interesting to note how successful we have been in requiring that, and how the development community has been willing to provide that as an in-kind amenity. We also have other unmet needs such as arts and culture in our city, and I think if we turned our attention similarly to requiring arts and culture spaces in the same way that we have childcare, we would also, I think, have the ability to tackle another problem. One of the other observations that I think I'll note at this point as the work is moving forward with our staff is the sort of the fine line around the use of residential. There may well be situations where it makes sense to have childcare closer to homes and something can be converted, but I think we have to be very thoughtful about how much and where, because not only do we not want to take away housing stock in a housing crisis and trade one issue for another, I'm also very sensitive to the commercial commoditization of residential land for profit. And there are a number of operators out there that it's quite different operating something in the home in which you live, where you potentially have an area that is dedicated, developed, delivers quality childcare, meets the guidelines, and wanting to maintain another asset that can run as a business. And not everybody's running $10 a day childcare. A lot of these are running for profit, and that becomes a profit venture and potentially avoids people getting looped into something like, or having to pay for something like the EHT, the empty homes tax, or invest property and sort of residential property for commercial and financial gain. And so I think there are a lot of policy intersections there that really need to be thought about, both housing impact as well as things like EHT and other taxes, and really where that intersection is, as well as neighborhood impacts, as was noted. But that one I'm looking forward to hearing more about, because I don't think that is as simple as it seems. Although I am intrigued to sort of learn more and see if there's a balance that we can strike there. And then the last thing I'll say is that having the Made in Vancouver guidelines, to me, never makes sense, because it's theoretically kids should be just as safe if they're at a daycare in Burnaby or in Prince George as they are in Vancouver. And this reminds me very much of when we had different capacity regulations and fire guidelines for our bars and restaurants, which we moved to also harmonize with the provincial regulations, because the impact was that it just makes it more costly and more expensive to deliver much needed services in Vancouver than anywhere else in the province. And if you use that bar and pub sort of restaurant analogy, literally, if you ran the same bar in Burnaby, again, or Prince George, you could have had more people in that bar than if you had the same offering and the same footprint, same physical size in Vancouver. And so we moved to streamline that. I think that's very analogous to what we're talking about here in harmonizing the guidelines. And so it's about our commitment to sort of streamlining red tape and removing some of those barriers. So I'm looking forward to seeing some analysis that comes back from staff as part of our permitting improvement as to how much time and money we will save, and what it will look like to open a childcare in Vancouver after harmonization versus what it takes in terms of time and money today. So thank you, and I appreciate the work.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Claassen.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Thank you very much, staff, for the report. Our speakers, Nazma did a fantastic job of really, I think, stating very clearly the challenge that families face here. It really becomes a question of whether they'll be able to live and work in our city or not. And this is why I think it's so important that our council and our city staff are really focused on this. It's also great to hear again from Sharon Gregson, who has just been an absolute pillar in the work of trying to promote safe and affordable childcare locally and across the country. We know that having childcare really enables families to thrive, and it supports our workforce and contributes to a more inclusive and equitable city. We've made some significant strides. It's fantastic to hear about the thousands of spaces that have been created and or are in stream, but we still have that gap of just over 4,000 spaces. So I think we need to continue to be as creative and thoughtful as possible in terms of how we apply these changes that began with other councils, but certainly I remember one of the first motions that was brought by Councillor Dominato right after this council was sworn in, to try and do the harmonization of regulations that I think is going some way to improve the ability for us to create new spaces. On the subject of expanding childcare in residential spaces. This is a file that I've been sort of working on and working with our staff quite closely on. I have been sort of seeing some progress on this one. We know, remember the story that went viral in August of 2023 when there was somebody trying to double the number of spaces, and how it really was a question of our guidelines versus the community supporting this or not. We're starting to see some new opportunities, and having met with people who are very much promoting and trying to build these kinds of residential spaces, I know that the margins are very small. This is not a high profit making endeavor. It usually is driven by passion and usually by parents who are really struggling to try and find childcare for themselves. The in-kind contributions from developers are extremely heartening result of the way that we build our city right now. And again, I'm glad that we're able to kind of use those tools to try and create as many new spaces as possible. We have many innovative approaches that have helped us create new spaces quickly while ensuring childcare remains a priority for our city's long-term planning. I also want to just acknowledge the work that is going around the downtown core. I think to myself, if I was living in Manhattan, a very dense urban setting, how do they provide childcare? The downtown core is, in a very similar way, is a very dense, a lot of office, and surely there are examples and best practices that we can glean from other jurisdictions. And finally, I'd like to just also thank the province of British Columbia. They have been, I think, an exceptional partner in this one. I'm very glad that there are conversations happening around the modular project that we are looking at that is a partnership with the city that includes the land. So our real estate team have done, I think, fantastic work in identifying a really ideal location where it will help to support the growing River District neighborhood as well as the southeast quadrant of our city. And I know that the province is taking a very close look at this opportunity. So again, thanks to staff for all the work and for the innovation and creativity that they're putting into this, because we know at the end of the day that having these childcare spaces is really core to our ability to kind of grow our economy and support families in our city. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Dominado.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff for the update and the presentation, and echoing the comments of my colleague, Councillor Claassen, is really appreciated hearing from Nazma and from Sharon today, particularly because you articulated the considerations of families very well. And just touching on the focus of today's report and the focus on 0 to 5, we know that is one of the hardest ages to find childcare for when you're a new parent. And so appreciation for that focus. I do want to reflect, and Nazma, I appreciated your comments about the joy of getting the phone call of finding childcare in 2012. I was at the very same time in 2012 looking for childcare for my daughter, who is almost 1. And I know how challenging it is for families. I had, some have heard this already because they were on council with me last term, but I had a spreadsheet as long as my arm of all these childcares across the city, because I didn't even know where I was living yet. I was moving back to the city. And so I was applying for childcares in neighborhoods all over the place. And it's incredibly stressful, especially when you have a looming work date ahead of you of going back to work and wanting to ensure that your child is going to be safe and cared for, and that quality care. So it's not just about having care, it's quality care. And so I just want to acknowledge that, and I still have, my one daughter is now still in after school care, and so that's another part of the puzzle. But I do want to say I'm really excited to hear back on the opportunities for how we support the expansion of childcare within the residential settings, and what that might look like, again, for the ease and support of families. I'm also really looking forward to more around the modular structures with workforce housing and what we might do there on city-owned space. And just simply to close out on, at the end of the day, providing quality childcare and enabling quality childcare in the city is fundamental to quality of life. People, if they're coming to the city, they're looking for a home, they're looking for jobs. If they have families and children, they're looking for quality childcare, and then they're looking for services and amenities. And it certainly can be a deciding factor. If you don't think you're going to find childcare, then why would you come here? You can go to other municipalities, and it is critical to having a thriving economy as well, and to gender equity that Sharon identified as well. So really pleased to see the progress in the work, and look forward to further updates later in the year. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. This is the end of our speakers list. I'm now going to call the vote. Clerk, can you take us to the voting screen? And committee members, please register your vote. Okay, so this report passed unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for our amazing staff members. Thanks. All right, so that completes report 1 on the agenda. We're gonna now move on to the report number 2, Older Person Strategic Framework and 2025 Early Actions. Before we begin these agenda items, if anyone believes they have a conflict of interest, now is the time to declare it. Okay, shall we take just like a 5 minutes break? Okay, so let's take a 5 minutes recess. We're gonna come back at 11.
we're gonna be back to the council. We need one more. Doesn't seem like it. We just need one more to have quorum.
Chair, it's Councillor Bly. I'm online if that helps.
All right. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to be here today. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. My name is Anthony Kupfer-Schmidt. I'm the Strategic Lead Aging and Older Persons in the Strategy and Support Office within the Office of the City Manager. So I'm here to speak to you today about the Older Person Strategic Framework and 2025 early actions. The overview of our conversation today, we will do a review of the recommendations before Mayor and Council today, give you a little bit of background, discuss Council direction to date, talk a little bit about the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities Framework, an overview of timeline, discuss the draft strategic framework, and draft 2025 early actions. So the recommendations before Mayor and Council today are that Council approve the Older Person Strategic Framework and 2025 early actions contained in Appendix A of this report, that Council directs staff to report back to Council in Q4 2025 with a 2026 implementation plan that identifies timelines and deliverables for next steps, and that Council directs staff to submit an application to join the World Health Organization Global Network for Age-Friendly Cities and Communities, and request that the Mayor write a letter in support of this application. A little bit of background. There are over 110,000 adults aged 65 years and older that live in Vancouver. As of the 2021 census, there's 17% of the population are 65 years of age and older. This particular age group grew at 5 times the rate of the under 65 population in the between 2016 and 2021. And so this age group represents about a third of that age group is actually 75 years of age and older as well. A further 13% of the population of Vancouver is 55 to 64 years of age. And by the year 2045, Vancouver will be the home of over 267,000 older adults. To this point, Council has had an age-friendly action plan from the year 2013 to 2015, and at that time, the City of Vancouver successfully applied to be recognized as an age-friendly city by the province of British Columbia. More recently, in January of 2022, Council passed a motion advancing efforts for an age-friendly City of Vancouver. This motion directed staff to explore and report back on a plan to advance efforts to make Vancouver an age-friendly city with an ongoing intersectional approach. That was the previous Council, and this Council, in December of 2022, passed a motion to review the city's age-friendly action plan and explore aligning it with the WHO's Age-Friendly Cities Framework. So very briefly about the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities Framework. It has 8 domains, everything from transportation and housing, and outdoor spaces and buildings, to communication and information, civic participation and employment, respect and social inclusion, social participation, and community and healthcare. So it's quite broad, trying to encompass all of the areas of a city that make it equitable for the aging population. The timeline for this work. We've conceptualized this as the first phase leading up to today's council report, which has been the development of the framework and 2025 early actions, engagement with the city's Older Persons and Elders Advisory Committee, and some targeted external consultation with key partners. Proposed phase 2 of this work would run for this year, which would include continued implementation of the early actions identified here for this year, and then to develop longer-term actions and a 2026 implementation plan, including engagement this spring with older adults and key community partners. And the intention by the end of this year to report back to Council with a progress update on the 2025 early actions and that 2026 implementation plan. So here's an overview of the proposed Older Person Strategic Framework. This is structured with a vision statement, a mission statement, domains, specific domains, and then cross-cutting foundations. So we're proposing a vision statement that Vancouver is a city where older persons are valued, engaged, and supported. A 3-part mission statement that includes integrating a strategic aging lens in all of our work to ensure that older persons can live well in Vancouver. Delivering and enabling programs, services, facilities, and built environments that are inclusive and supportive of older persons to make Vancouver a great place to age, and working with partners to make the city equitable for the aging population. We are proposing condensing the 8 domains of the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Cities Framework into 6 domains and deliberately framing these in person-centered language, beginning with older persons in Vancouver. So those domains are that older persons in Vancouver are engaged and included, connected and informed, live in a home that supports aging in the right place, can get around with dignity, have access to spaces and places that meet their needs, and are supported by programs and services that enable health and well-being. The framework also has cross-cutting foundational elements, which we'll talk about more as well, but those include diversity, equity, and inclusion, community connections, taking a whole city approach, and cross-sectoral collaboration and advocacy. So, a busy slide, but these are strategic objectives underneath each of the domains of this framework. In the engaged and included pillar, proposing strategic objectives of social connections help to reduce and prevent isolation and loneliness. Participation in elections, public engagements, and other civic activities are supported. Volunteer and employment opportunities enable meaningful contributions, and ageism is openly recognized and addressed. In the connected and informed pillar, strategic objectives include system navigation and information supports overcome digital and connectivity barriers. City communication channels follow accessibility best practices. Staff are knowledgeable about older persons and how to best interact with them. And days of recognition are acknowledged and celebrated. In the housing pillar, we've identified strategic objectives of sufficient, affordable, and appropriate housing for older persons exist in all neighborhoods. Homes are safe, designed to accessibility standards, and foster connections with neighbors. And multi-unit residential buildings with a high proportion of older persons include integrated programs and services. In the transportation domain, the strategic objectives include transportation services, facilitate community participation, and infrastructure investments and wayfinding enable mobility, access, safety, and active transportation. In the built environment pillar, we have strategic objectives of spaces and facilities for older persons of all abilities are in place around the city. Public realm improvements consider the needs of older persons and foster social and community connections for all ages. Public washrooms are available and accessible, and local businesses are accessible to and supportive of older persons. And lastly, in the health and community services domain, we have strategic objectives of community engaged programs and services are enhanced through city sites. Community organizations are coordinated and supported to collaborate. City grants continue to support community organizations to deliver key programs, services, and infrastructure for older persons. Community and health services are aligned, and supports are in place to prepare for emergencies and climate change impacts. A little bit more detail on the foundational elements of this framework. So diversity, equity, and inclusion cuts across all of these domains. And there's a few groups we've specifically want to identify in this foundational element. Want to, of course, ensure that this framework is considering the needs of persons with dementia. Also, urban indigenous elders. urban Indigenous older persons and Indigenous elders as well from local nations, as well as considering the intersections with other equity-impacted identities. We have framed a Community Connections Foundation, which ensures there is a place to recognize the valuable role that family and friend caregivers of older persons play in supporting seniors, and also the importance of intergenerational relationships. We have a foundational element of whole city approach, so working across various city departments to ensure that we're touching on all the elements of an age-friendly city. And also cross-sectoral collaboration and advocacy, because there's so many elements of an age-friendly or age-equitable city that are outside of the scope of the municipality. So this involves how the municipality works with community organizations, private businesses, other levels of government, including the BC Seniors Advocate, Vancouver Coastal Health, Providence Healthcare, Metro Vancouver, TransLink, research institutions, other funders, and also other municipalities, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So next, we'll shift into the draft 2025 early actions. So the approach we've taken for developing these actions for this year are to consider high-impact early actions, as well as actions that we are able to start quickly within existing resources. Some of these actions are cross-cutting, and some are specific to the domains in the framework. And these actions are either characterized as new or ongoing work. So we'll start with the proposed cross-cutting early actions for 2025. The first is to enhance the Healthy City strategy to include a life course approach. This is, of course, ongoing work that this council has approved to renew the Healthy City strategy, and this will be an element of that work. We're also proposing to maintain ongoing liaison with senior governments on issues of importance to older persons, as well as to explore opportunities to discuss aging-related priorities at the Social Issues Subcommittee of the Metro Vancouver Regional Planning Advisory Committee. We are also proposing to work with BC Healthy Communities and potentially UBCM to activate a network of age-friendly BC communities so that we can learn from one another and support broader advocacy efforts. To formalize a cross-departmental approach to support delivery of priorities for the aging population. To provide regular updates to the city's Older Persons and Elders Advisory Committee, and to apply to join the WHO's Global Network for Age-Friendly Cities and Communities. There's also 2025 early actions by each of the domains in the framework. So in the engaged and included domain, we are proposing an action for this year to work with partners to carry out awareness campaigns focused on ageism and older persons. In the connected and informed domain, proposed actions include supporting older persons to overcome digital literacy barriers by enabling digital connection to ensure access to critical services, updating content about program services and resources for older persons on the city website to ensure access to accurate information, and celebrating aging and raising awareness of issues that impact older persons by recognizing dates of significance. In the housing domain, of course, building off of the work of the seniors housing strategy approved last July, but we want to start carrying out more of the early actions, including streamlining the development of senior social housing within neighborhoods throughout the city through pre-zoning within Vancouver's Social Housing Initiative, and improving the knowledge of older persons who rent and organizations that support them through a renter awareness campaign focused on the city's tenant relocation and protection policy. In the transportation domain, proposing integrating a strategic aging lens to consider the continued delivering infrastructure and programs, including new and widened sidewalks, sidewalk repairs, curb ramps, traffic signals, bus stops, bike lanes, and greenways. Want to accelerate programs to increase safety for older pedestrians, including more leading pedestrian intervals, flashing beacons, and longer pedestrian walk times. Integrating a strategic aging lens in the delivery of new public plazas, and updating transportation safety strategy with a focus on people who face higher risk of serious injury or death from incidents involving motor vehicles, including older persons. Last couple of slides. In the built environment domain, proposed actions for this year are to continue to ensure progress on new spaces for older persons, with a couple of examples being the Senior Center at Oak Ridge and the forthcoming Sunset Senior Center. Integrating a strategic aging lens in community and citywide planning, with an example being the Villages planning program underway. identifying opportunities to support implementation of the older person strategic framework in the next capital plan, and exploring how to better support Vancouver Coastal Health to deliver facilities for older persons. Lastly, in the health and community services domain, proposed actions include establishing and convening something called the Network of Organizations in Vancouver on Aging, or NOVA, to encourage coordination and collaboration of community organizations that work in aging, exploring the expansion of multi-year funding to select organizations with a mandate to serve older persons, reconstituting the Vancouver's Older Persons Funders Table to better coordinate financial resources with partners. The Parks Board is proposing completing an analysis of current programs and services for older persons at community centers to help identify the strengths and gaps there. And lastly, to liaise with Providence Healthcare on the launch of the Centre for Healthy Aging at the new St. Paul's Hospital. So in summary, again, the three recommendations before Council today are to approve this framework and the actions for this year, directing staff to report back at the end of this year with the next year's implementation plan with timelines and deliverables, and to submit an application to join the WHO Global Network for Age-Friendly Cities and Communities with a letter of support from the Mayor. So that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony, for the presentation. We're going to move on to the committee members. You have up to 5 minutes to ask questions of team members. Councillor Kirby-Yung, please go ahead. Councillor Kirby-Yung, are you there?
I think that's a holdover, Chair.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so please add your name to the queue, everyone. I haven't seen anyone. There's no one on the queue. Okay, is Councillor Fry the first one? Okay. And then I saw Councillor Kirby-Yung. Okay, perfect. Councillor Fry, please go ahead.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. We just lost you. Okay. Well,
so close.
There we go. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Anthony. So the population of Vancouver is aging. I think that's a big takeaway on how we need to sort of anticipate. And I want to just unpack a little bit when you talk about homes that support aging in place.
Yes.
Is that supportive housing?
So that could be much broader than that. That could be everything from renovations and upgrades in a senior's own personal home that enables them to live there longer, or it could be other forms of housing right across the spectrum.
Right. Now, in a more broader sense, with regard to supportive housing, is that an anticipated area that we will need to grow to meet the need, or are not just the general that supports aging in place, but actually literal supportive housing as is defined by Coastal Health and BC Housing?
There's a projected need and growth for more multiple forms of housing, including social housing, long-term care beds, or quite a variety of housing. Yes.
And what does the ecosystem look like between private for-profit aging in place kind of housing and public?
Mm-hmm.
Just for broader context.
The ecosystem in general?
Yeah.
There is both, talking social housing or long-term care housing, or both, just in general?
In general. Like
in general? Yeah, I think, and please feel free to let me know if you'd like me to elaborate further, but in general, there's a greater need for all of these forms of housing. There's different providers that deliver these types of housing at different rates. For example, Vancouver Coastal Health plays an important role in delivering long-term care beds. Various private and not-for-profit organizations provide other levels of housing, including like social housing. So it's quite a diverse landscape, is what I would say, and it really requires everyone collaborating to bring all those types of housing forward.
And so between things like OAP and safer grants and stuff, are we able to predict that we will have the housing for people? Do we need to invest more? Not necessarily us, but we generally as a society.
I would think in general as a society, there's a growing demand and greater investment is needed across various forms of housing. Yes.
And so one of the foundation pieces you have in here is diversity, equity, and inclusion,
yes,
which I take to mean sort of culturally appropriate housing options for, say, LGBTQIA and
yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the things. While I haven't named that population, of course, in this presentation, that's certainly a population that would benefit from focused housing. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And so when we contemplate what that looks like, are we talking about like very specific housing typologies that are exclusive to that population, or?
I think it's a combination. So there's lots of advantages to housing typologies that are specific to certain populations, and sometimes that's a necessity. And in other cases, it's really about the integration, so that different populations and different groups can live together. I will say all under one roof, for lack of a better expression, right?
Okay. One thing that I've been keen on and interested in for some time that isn't mentioned in this, and maybe may form a larger strategy consideration, is what has been colloquially referred to as Golden Girls housing.
Right.
Which is a scenario where it would be like individual bedrooms, maybe even individual bathrooms, but shared kind of housing. Is that something that we're looking at as a shared housing model that might help people age in a more sort of inclusive community environment that isn't necessarily institutionalized?
That's a great question. I don't recall that there is a specific action in the seniors housing strategy focused on that. I think there's more potential to do some work in that area.
So there may be some work coming.
Not that I can speak to. No, Dan, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
It's definitely an interesting emergent trend that we're seeing in other jurisdictions, and I'm curious to see if we can look at it here.
Yes, certainly. It is a trend we're aware of. I'm Dan Garrison, Director of Housing Policy. Right now, in our bylaws, 5 unrelated people can live together in a situation like that. So there are opportunities where, in sort of smaller collective forms, that would be able to be done now. It'd be a bigger exercise to look at if we wanted to expand collective forms of housing beyond what's currently allowed. It's not currently on our work program to look at that. We have looked at it before, and it does get quite complex in terms of not the goal is clear, but what you would have to amend in the bylaw and what the sort of unintended consequences of that would be is a bit complex. So, but currently there's no barriers at the city to 5 unrelated individuals living together in a situation
with
like
the
that.
building typology, possibly.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, you would have to see. We generally see a drive towards smaller bedrooms for financial viability reasons. If you do see people building sort of 4-bedroom units, almost makes you think of sort of like the quads that you see in student housing at universities.
And I'm out of time, and I don't want to put the chair on the spot, but I would like to run for a second round of questions. If that.
We can ask Councillor Clausen to ask second round. You're already over time. Yeah.
Second round.
Okay. Seconder?
Thank you. Yes.
Councillor Dominado, all in favor say yea. Opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. Please go ahead, Councillor Clausen.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just in response to Councillor Fry's questions, a number of councillors attended a meeting with leadership team at Vancouver Coastal Health on Friday. They gave us a number that we were, in terms of long-term care beds, we were about 1,800 short from our current needs. But one of the approaches that they are looking at are some smaller buildings rather than doing large-scale campuses. So that's something potentially presents an opportunity and that is happening in other jurisdictions, but it's something that we haven't really seen widely adopted here in the city. Just in terms of, first of all, thanks very much, Anthony. I thought you were going to have to towel off after that presentation because there's a lot going on there and your enthusiasm just kind of shines. So what, if we move forward with this, what are the most immediate changes that seniors can expect in 2025?
That's a good question. So, I mean, obviously the approach has been to develop this with sort of that annual cycle in mind. Some examples would be to hopefully work to strengthen digital literacy type programs for seniors. That would be certainly one example. I think some of the actions are a little bit more, I will say, sector. Are set to help develop the sector. For example, better coordinating the community-based organizations. But I would hope that over time that would benefit seniors too. I think some of what's planned for improvements to things like sidewalks and crosswalks will instantly have that impact in the lives of seniors. Just a couple of examples.
That's great. And I really love the digital literacy piece. My mother, who is 90 years old and will hate me for telling that publicly, is been rocking the Uber on her smartphone for a long time and gets around very easily. Just in terms of I do want to bring the topic of social isolation, which is a real undercurrent to health here. What are the couple of the biggest things that we could possibly do to address this? And I think it's sort of embedded in this plan to some extent.
Yeah, it's definitely named for front and center in the framework itself. There's not necessarily the typical actions that you would think of identified for 2025 to address isolation and loneliness. However, for example, improvements to things like sidewalks and curb cuts help seniors feel more confident being able to step out of their homes, and that can go a long way to addressing isolation and loneliness.
Just keep an eye on the time here. The villages and neighborhood centers were cited, and I know we got some of our engineering and planning team here, but I hope that that's something that we can kind of embed in some of that thinking in terms of making some of those nodes a little bit more seniors friendly. And I'm not sure for any particular discussion happening around that right now, but I'd be very much looking.
I think there's those opportunities this year as the villages program is developed and rolled out.
What are our metrics for success of this strategy?
That's an excellent question. So at this stage, there are not specific measurable outcomes that have been set. The intention was to bring the framework to council with 2025 actions so we could hit the ground running and then do further engagement. But we would be developing sort of what that evaluation of the plan looks like going forward. And with that annual cycle of the implementation plan and reporting back to council, there is that ongoing accountability as well.
And we'd be able to gather feedback from seniors and their caregivers as well?
That is absolutely the intention for the broader public engagement plan for this spring, Q2.
Okay, last question. Just what's the timeline for the next phase of the strategy? And given that we're moving out right now with this first set of
Yeah, I think the next phase would be to really dig into the actions that are approved today, and then to be carrying out these actions this year, and then the engagement, as I said, and then moving into that annual cycle. So we will be in this process of regularly monitoring, evaluating, and setting priorities for the year for ongoing and new actions.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Those are my questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Clausen. Councillor Carbian, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for a great presentation, Anthony. A number of us have received a communication from a former member for the Older Persons and Elder Advisory Committee that does a lot of work in this area. You may be familiar.
I am, absolutely, yes.
And so I know that Council is being asked to endorse the Older Persons Strategic Framework here, and I'm going to characterize it as, to frame the question, that summarizes on sort of wellness, community participation, those kinds of things. There's a couple of areas I think that are worthy here that have been brought up, and I wonder if you can comment how and when they would come into the framework that I don't see reflected here.
Absolutely.
And so the first one is really around safety and crime prevention, recognizing that older individuals, sadly, are often more the victims of fraud, whether it's financial scams, potentially more vulnerable to we see it in terms of some of the impacts on streets, right? They perhaps may be more frail, et cetera. And so I'm seeing a lot around wellness in that, but not necessarily on the safety piece. Can you comment on that?
I certainly can. Absolutely, yes. The intention was to develop this framework with a cross-departmental approach to be able to get it in front of council, pair it with some actions, and sort of get some momentum and things going. The absolute intention is to do further engagement with, for example, Vancouver Police, Vancouver Fire Rescue. That's the intention for this year. There's so much good work that VPD already does around their frauds and scams program. Education workshop for seniors is one example. And from a fire rescue perspective, a lot of the time they're an early point of contact for seniors that experience falls or perhaps start small fires. So there's important roles that both VPD and VFRS can play, and we'd like to really dig into that this year.
That's great to hear. Where would that fit into the framework? Like if I'm looking to see that reflected, and I'm just looking at the language, currently I'm on the slide that is titled Older Persons Strategic Framework. Where would I see that? Or
that is a good question. So I wouldn't say, the language around safety has largely been framed around things like housing at this in the framework as it currently is. So I think you might argue that there's not necessarily any one particular home in the framework for those elements. So I think that's something that would be further expanded on with some deeper engagement. So.
Okay, so that wouldn't require council direction. That's something staff can take away as this is kind of a developing Organic process, is that
From
fair?
my perspective, yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Another area that was raised, and I think it's a fair one, and you started to touch on it a bit in terms of you saying intersection with organizations like BFRS, was around emergency preparedness in general. And so I think about things like the heat dome, where we lost sadly 100 people across BC, a lot of them seniors that are more vulnerable and less able to sort of reach out for assistance.
Absolutely.
And so that's sort of along the lines, a bit different than being a victim of crime, but it relates to sort of physical safety and well-being. So are we?
Yes. So, I mean, as you may have seen, Councillor Kirby-Young, there is that element, the importance of that work is embedded in the framework itself. There's not necessarily a named 2025 early action specific to that work, but of course there's ongoing work within the city, and we would be connected with that work.
Okay. That's great. And then the question is sort of on the foundations piece.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like the diversity component would cover a number of different intersections, as was referenced earlier, whether it's
That's absolutely the intention.
people of
Rather
different-
than trying to create a comprehensive list and therefore leaving out a certain population, that's absolutely the intention of that foundational
So it could
element.
be the
Yes.
LGBT community, it could be people of diverse cultural backgrounds. It could
Low
be-
income seniors, seniors who English is not their first language. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you. Appreciate the work.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Fry, second round, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Anthony. Going back to the general questions around the Golden Girls housing and some of the comments that we've also heard from other councillors and pieces around dementia and safety and all the, I mean, it really speaks to this, I think, larger consideration around social isolation. And I note that was highlighted in Eddie Elmer's note to us as well. What are we doing? What can we do around the social isolation? Is there a role for the city to more proactively engage, and what kind of tools do we have at our disposal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities. They haven't necessarily been expressly named in any 2025 early actions, other than, public realm improvements, which encourage those social connections and gathering places. I think there is, and of course, the important role the community centers play is one example of where people can come together. I think there's lots of opportunities to do more in this area, and I hope with, some further resources and attention that we can start to name more precise actions in that area going forward.
Okay, so that is in the plan.
So yeah, we've definitely embedded, the very first sort of element of the first pillar of the strategic objectives is around that social connections and to address isolation and loneliness. So it's named there. As I mentioned, there's no specific action in the 2025 early actions that speaks directly to, for example, a programmatic intervention for isolation and loneliness. Yeah.
Certainly, I think that's. I look forward to seeing something more on that. Yep. And lastly, washrooms.
Yes.
Now, public washrooms has long been a conversation that we've had around washroom strategies, and we seem to struggle with how we would fund that, the operating budget for it. And hi, Belle. Please, I'm just, I feel like we could do a lot more in the public washroom space. And certainly we've talked in the past about even baking it in as a community amenity contribution, as a public benefit and new builds, and how we can make that kind of, I know we struggle with the operating side and keeping people safe from overdoses and stuff like that, but clearly it's a demonstrated need. And I hear often about the need
Yeah,
for washroom.
thank you for the question. Belle Chung, Associate Director in Strategy and Project Support in CMO. So we also hold the washroom strategy within our work, and that piece is underway right now. And so similar to this framework, it's also a cross-departmental piece where we're working sort of across the city in terms of priorities and needs for washrooms. And so this work has been informed kind of by the washrooms work that is underway, and we're closely connecting this older persons framework with the development of the washroom strategic framework, and certainly kind of all the challenges you mentioned in terms of operations, different challenges in neighborhoods are things that we're considering, but also recognizing, I think, that the need for washrooms is something that sort of is needed across the city and then across different life spectrums as well. So that is something we're currently working on, yes.
And when can we expect some updates on that then?
For the washroom strategy? So we are currently underway right now, and I think our hope is to bring that back before the end of the year.
Okay, thanks, Belle.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Fry. Councillor Claassen, please go ahead.
Chair, I just put myself back in the queue, just I'm looking at the time, and we've got 8 speakers, and I'm just wondering if council might want to just make sure that we complete the hearing the speakers at the very least. Timing-wise, we should be able to do it with the 25 minutes we have until the noon break, but I just want to put that out there in case we do get a little close to
Do you want to move a motion? Councilor Carbion?
Yeah, I was just going to say I would move to hear the speakers and finish the business because this is our last item.
We need a seconder. Seconded by Councilor Montague. All in favor say yeah. Opposed say nay. Okay, the motion carries. Thanks. All right. So this is the end of the speakers list. Now we're going to hear from the registered public speaker for this report. Public speakers should state whether they are in support or in opposition of the recommendations and may only speak once. I will also ask speakers if they are the residents of Vancouver if it is not noted on the speakers list. Our first public speaker is Varosh Gumochin, the interim chair, other people, other advisory committee. Please go ahead, Varosh. Yeah, you have 3 minutes.
Clerks will probably move it for you then once they see.
Perfect, no problem. I won't take too much time. Your Honor, Mayor Sims and councilors, really exciting day today. This is just amazing. I'm just so excited to be here. My name is Varosh Gumochin, and I live in Vancouver. So I serve on the as an interim chair on the OPIAC. Anthony mentioned the Older People, Elders Advisory Committee, and today I'm here to express OPIAC's full support for the Older Person Strategic Framework that was presented. At a recent committee meeting, we unanimously passed a motion in favor of this initiative. We firmly believe that it is council to implement, that it is crucial, not council, crucial, to implement this framework without delay. OPIAC has actively collaborated with Anthony throughout the development of this document. Of course, he did all the work, but we were supporting him. Seniors living in Vancouver face significant challenges related to, break it down to housing, accessibility, community services, climate resilience, and communication resources. In our increasingly dense city, isolation and loneliness, of course, is a crucial problem among seniors. It's a passing concern for the seniors. The 2025 document presented is a promising model for fostering positive change. We are pleased to report that OPIAC's relationship with city staff and council has been productive and satisfactory. To uphold the recommendations outlined in the report, OPIAC commends all the city departments for this exemplary work. Our committee is dedicated to enhancing and innovating the quality of life for seniors by eliminating barriers. Given the demographics of our city, Vancouver holds a unique responsibility to address the critical needs of our seniors population. OPIAC will continue to advocate on behalf of our elders residents and work in partnership with community services providers and the city's senior planning department. We are committed to working alongside Anthony to align with the strategic directions, objectives, and activities outlined. Just about done. The city and OPIAC and the community partners have been diligently addressing these issues, and we extend our heartfelt thanks for this outstanding contribution. We look forward to continued support from the mayor and council on these objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Varosh. Thank you for speaking to council. Okay, so our next registered speaker is Norm Leach, Executive Director, Frog Hollow Neighborhood House. Is Norm on the line? Okay, Norm is not. I'm gonna come back.
Good morning.
Oh, sorry. We're gonna move on to the next speaker. Is Betty Thompson? Yeah,
that's you.
That's me.
Okay, please go ahead, Betty. You have
Okay.
3 minutes whenever you're ready.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Betty Thompson, and I'm speaking in support of this initiative. I represent a group of approximately 12 to 20 seniors who call themselves the Dunbar Seniors Cafe. We have been meeting at the local Dunbar St. Philip's Church for the past 18 months. Why St. Philip's? When we wanted to meet for the kinds of senior activities described in today's report, we approached our local community center and were largely unsuccessful. Then St. Philip's volunteered to give us a space for weekly social engagement meetings. This is an excellent example of a private, that is non-city, entity taking care of seniors. In the past year or so, we also learned about the Ask Friendship Bus, which was funded to take seniors on outings. Unfortunately, due to a variety of regulations, the Ask Bus was unable to stop at St. Philip's to pick up our group of seniors. Thanks largely to Kit's Neighborhood House and a community connector, Terrence Chan, we now can use the Ask Bus to pick up our group of seniors and transport us to Kit's Neighborhood House. This is an excellent example of how the various services for seniors are uncoordinated and non-cooperative until we start getting together with a community connector. Why is this all important? The Dunbar Seniors Cafe members have been trying for more than 3 years to achieve the factors described in this report. We urgently want social engagement, senior-friendly transportation, access to clinics, housing, and senior centers, and programs that support our health and our well-being, whether we are at home or at senior facilities. We want to reach out to seniors who are isolated at home. We recognize that many do not use digital equipment and need to be reached through traditional means such as in-person and print outreach. We want to include all seniors, even those in private living facilities, retirement homes, in our efforts. A public-private collaboration is ideal. Most of all, although we recognize the utmost value of this excellent report, the Dunbar Seniors Cafe is comprised of individuals in advance of 75 years of age, and our time to appreciate any changes in Vancouver is limited by our reduced time left on this earth. We seniors have numerous needs and wishes to make our lives as positive as possible in our golden years. Please approve not only this report, but commit the resources to implement coordinated and cooperative services to all Vancouver seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Thank you for speaking to council. The next speaker is Karen Rabaru, the chair of the board, ILC Canada, chair of the steering council, CCAA. Is Karen on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead. You have
Can
3
you
minutes.
hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Your Worship, Mayor Sim, and esteemed members of the City Council of Vancouver, thank you. I want to start by commending Vancouver's leadership in advancing the rights and well-being of older persons. Your strategic framework sets a very strong foundation, and I especially appreciate your explicit focus on ageism awareness. But these movements that don't happen in isolation. This is transformative, systemic change which requires collective impact. And it takes committed leaders like you to align your efforts, break silos, and coalesce communities toward a shared vision. Now, that brings me to our shared vision. The Canadian Coalition Against Ageism's vision is to eliminate ageism in Canada and to protect and promote human rights for older people. Through our coalition, we have a reach of 12 million plus older Canadians. Now, why are we even talking about this? Because ageism affects every single one of us, today, tomorrow, and in the future. It's the last acceptable form of discrimination, which shapes the policies in the workplaces and healthcare and social systems in ways that limits opportunities and erodes our dignity and steals potential from all ages. I was listening to Betty talk about the work that they're doing, and that was amazing. So Vancouver is taking a major step forward in this way. And it reminds me of the first follower. It takes courage to take this first step, and cities like Vancouver are the first followers to lead a nationwide movement to combat ageism. By stepping forward now, you not only strengthen the city's impact, you will inspire other cities, provinces, and even federal leadership to follow. The opportunities for collective impact is it's just amazing. We can work together to amplify your ageism awareness campaign, to strengthen your social housing efforts, to expand intergenerational and aspects and address social isolation. I think we've talked a little bit, Anthony has reported on many of these, so I'm not going to take up much time, but it's important to look at social prescribing, mental health and physical health and supports, as well as end-of-life care accessibility. Betty talked about that as well. We talked a little bit about challenges like the digital divide, elder abuse, lifelong learning, and climate change. Lastly, I want to conclude by saying that this is a defining moment for Canada. Right now, an important resolution is about to be tabled at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva. This is going to happen in March. Canada has not committed to moving forward with this, but cities like Vancouver, which are progressive, globally connected, and committed to aging equity, can shape this national conversation. So I invite you, the City of Vancouver, to catalyze this movement that brings other cities along in Canada and the rest of the world. You can show true leadership in aging equity. I urge you to join us on February 24th at a special meeting to discuss Canada's role in this resolution at the Human Rights Council. Let's work together in aligning our efforts, mobilizing our communities, and creating lasting impact. Let's make the City of Vancouver the leader in fighting ageism and secure the rights of older people today and for generations to come. I thank you very much. I have sent you some information by email as well. I'm always available to chat with you further if you're interested. Thank you, Mayor, and the City Council. Over to you.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is speaker number 4, Mark White, former chair and former OPEAC member. Hey, Mark.
Hi.
Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Great. Good morning, Acting Chair, Mayor, and Council, and City staff. As former chair of OPEAC, I strongly support the Older Person Strategic Framework and 2025 early actions. The vision and mission speak directly to the core values that are deeply held by older persons in Vancouver and expressed in the 8 interconnected domains of the age-friendly framework. The cross-cutting early actions brings Vancouver to Metro Vancouver, provincial table, and the global network for age-friendly cities and communities, where it can learn from others and become a proactive force in reshaping municipal planning using a life course lens. We're also pleased to note the priority to enhance collaboration and coordination with Vancouver Coastal Health, with a focus on older persons to advance the social determinants of health. It was through the Canada-wide jurisdictional scan conducted by OPEAC Committee that informed the Council that a cross-departmental approach was needed. And this approach was reinforced by the City Manager and this Council. We now have a strong foundation for the City of Vancouver to demonstrate its creativity, innovation, and leadership in creating a city where all residents can thrive, recognizing the talent as well as the needs of older persons, elders, families, and friends, including those impacted by dementia and the blight of systemic discrimination. The Global Report on Ageism, and more recently the 2024 National Forum Call to Eliminating Ageism in Care and Support, demonstrates the need for municipalities and other sectors to recognize the impact of ageism within and across communities that result in poor health outcomes, lower quality of life, and economic discrimination, and a need for municipalities to play a critical role in the life course policy development and public education. I thank city staff and leadership involved in the creation of the Older Person Strategic Framework and 2025 Early Actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. All right, the next speaker is speaker number 5, Lynn Shepherd. Is Lynn on the line? No, okay, we're gonna come back to speaker number 5. Speaker number 6 is Christian Hauptmann. Okay, please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this strategic plan. My name is Christiane Hauptmann. I'm a resident of Vancouver, and you can tell by my accent that I'm foreign-born, but I'm now Canadian. I moved to Vancouver 17 years ago to become a professor at the University of British Columbia, where I hold an appointment in psychology with a special expertise in social determinants of health. I've not been involved in the strategic plan, but I've read it carefully. And in my humble opinion, City Council, you, have the opportunity to approve a thoughtful and actionable strategic plan that is grounded in the science. The plan takes a multi-pronged approach with the aging person at its center. It offers a vision of what this city could be known for. A city that is inclusive and willing to combat ageist stereotypes that keep older adults out. A city where older adults are supported to age in place. A city where planners take the time to think about the implications of pedestrian walk times at traffic lights so that our main arteries don't become permanent barriers for someone who has to rely on a walking aid, and that is a social connection issue. A city where older adults have access to spaces and programs that support their health and well-being. So, by adopting a plan like this plan, you have an opportunity to move the dial on age friendliness and make the city a better place for all people. And that includes older adults. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Speaker number 7 is Donna Webb. Donna, you have 3 minutes. You can start whenever you're ready.
Good morning, and thank you very much for allowing us to speak. I'm a neophyte. I only heard about this yesterday, but I am totally committed to supporting what Anthony has set up, and I only hope that you can deliver it as quickly as possible. I'm a Rotarian, I'm a Seroptimist, I'm involved with a big build in the city, and I also just finished doing a huge workshop where I researched 50 books on successful aging. And everything that you're talking about is right center forward. I listened with great intensity of your first speaker with daycare. And this is what they said: to overcome barriers, yes. To create opportunities, yes. For a healthy community, yes. Issues are not going to go away. They're only going to get worse. We have to realize that it's more expensive to not pass this and allow people to go into long-term care and hospitals instead of being as progressive as you people seem to be. And I applaud you for that. I applaud you for allowing us to talk. I think it's really important that we learn how to thrive and in an equitable situation. This is all from preschool and the quality of life. For me, it's now that we've got to keep this process going. I have been walking with Providence through something else that I'm involved with but COVID set up. And I argue that you're spending more money on warehousing than you are on making people thrive. And so when somebody suggested that their mother didn't want to be told that they're 90, I've been encouraging people to celebrate. I'm 83 years old. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. My mother at 60 wouldn't even have been able to crawl up here to talk. I've been sick for an entire week. This is so important that I came today, and I am ignorant, okay? I am totally ignorant about everything that's going on today, but I'm so excited to get involved. And Anthony has helped me yesterday with a phone call saying, put your name on. And I said, oh, what would I say? And he said, your passion. This is my passion. I support 100% what you're doing. Please deliver it. No more subcommittees, committees, and committees, and committees. Let's get down to the real point. Deliver, please. Sitting, listening to this, I am just so proud to be a Canadian, so proud to have this democratic process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. Really appreciate you speak to council. So this is the end of the speakers list. We're gonna go back to the first one we missed. Norm Leach. Is Norm here on the line? Okay. How about number 5, Lynn Shepherd? Okay, please go ahead.
Yes.
Lynn, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Lynn Shepherd. I support the report's recommendations fully. I'm a resident of Kitsilano. I'm a senior actively volunteering in several Westside organizations on seniors issues. So I know that older persons are experiencing a lot of anxiety about the affordability and livability of their neighborhoods. They currently don't feel included as policies are declared and implemented without their diversity as an aging population being integrated into planning. It's only after a great majority of detailed planning is presented publicly at city-sponsored events that residents have had opportunities to offer their concerns and opinions. This is a particular concern to me and my peers with regard to appropriate housing for seniors living on fixed incomes. Seniors' growing concerns over lack of inclusion in planning the future livability of their neighborhoods will become manifest at the ballot box in the next municipal election. However, this strategic framework's whole city approach, if implemented in 2025, is laid out in Appendix A, has potential for allaying some of their concerns. Seniors cannot be portrayed as a needy population that are a societal burden to be sidelined in policy decision-making. Instead, there are untapped skills and abilities among retirees that could be leveraged into building neighborhood connectedness as housing development expands throughout the city. I'm convinced that as the city's housing densifies, fostering positive interpersonal connections is what could make neighborhoods in the city's villages concept actually thrive. But that requires communicating to older persons that they are encouraged as volunteers to engage in collaborative decision-making. That means ensuring that nonprofit, community-based, senior-serving organizations working at the grassroots level have sustained funding. With ongoing core funding, they can promote and support volunteer engagement that builds community capacity to address the current stresses of affordability and livability. Otherwise, those multi-story high-rise buildings planned for densification on Vancouver's west side will perpetuate the social isolation and loneliness epidemic that characterizes much of the city's population. It doesn't just affect seniors. So please, support not only the intent, but also listen and learn from collaborative implementation of the early actions with a senior's lens. Engage meaningfully with seniors and nonprofit senior-serving organizations through NOVA, and seniors will respond favorably to being included in social planning for increased neighborliness. And that definitely enables seniors to age better in place. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about the framework and action plan and all the teamwork that went into developing it.
Thank you, Lynn. So this is the end of our speakers list. Thank you everyone for speaking to the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services. Would someone like to move a motion? Moved by Councillor Kirby-Young, seconded by Councillor Clausen. Committee members, is there any discussion? Mayor Sim, please go ahead.
Yeah, great. I just want to make a couple of really quick comments. First of all, thank you so much for coming in to our team. Thank you for the incredible work and the passion that you show on this topic as well. Look, I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief because a lot has been said here. I just want to make sure that people fully understand that in this chamber here, we are 100% committed to building an age-friendly city. Period, full stop. And, you know, I think everyone should know that by, 2030, which is not that far away, 1 out of 4 people will be over the age of 65 in the city. By the way, I still think that's really young. So, and based on my meandering journeys over the last couple of decades, I've had the honor and benefit of working in elder care, and it's complicated. You know, it's not just about, building housing, which is super important. I think we missed the mark if we look at this, I'm going to say opportunity way too simplistically. I know everyone sitting in the chamber right now fully understands that, you know, it's not necessarily the housing per se on its own, but it's about community. And we know if you have a strong community and if you can age in place with dignity, your health outcomes are a lot better. And then we can talk about the benefits of, you know, intergenerational transfer of knowledge and, you know, thoughts, and it's absolutely amazing. And Christiane, you mentioned, I believe it was you that you mentioned, you know, the time it takes to cross the street. This is a big deal. Like, and I just want to highlight this as one of the big deals. There's lots of big deals, but I actually have personal experience in that. And I remember I used to help my grandfather across the street when I was a little kid. And in 1984, I wasn't with him one day, and he actually was hit by a car on Southwest Marine Drive going to McDonald's for his coffee. Unfortunately, he never made it through that. And I think people forget, you know, the difference of 3 or 4 or 7 seconds makes it could be life and death. That's one of the, you know, and I'm sure everyone else here has lived experience in some way, shape, or form. Who can relate to something else that affects the elderly. And, you know, I'm super happy because I know these individuals in the chamber, my teammates, they're totally committed to making sure that we build an age-friendly city, and we'll be committed to doing that going forward. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I will be brief. I just want to start by thanking Anthony and Belle for the work. It's an important one, and also our Older Persons Advisory Committee. It's great to see both our current interim chair here, as well as our longstanding past and dedicated chair, and all the other members that have contributed. So thank you for coming out and lending your voice and perspective. It's staggering when you look at the numbers. I think Mayor Sim touched on that, but in the next 20 years, we're going to almost triple the number of older adults over 65 in the city of Vancouver. And at 267,000, you're getting not that far off from almost, 40% and nudging over time to half the population. That is really, really significant. And so I think there's a compelling sort of statistically objective rationale, but the one I would offer, I think the most is that I think that this is the right thing to do, and I think that societies are defined by how you look after your older persons. And there's a quote that I've always liked, and I just looked it up. It says, "Nobody grows old merely by living a number of years. We grow old by deserting our ideals. You may wrinkle the skin through the years, but to give up enthusiasm wrinkles the soul." And I have seen nothing but full-on enthusiasm in this chamber today and from everybody that's working on and contributing to the work. And so I'm really grateful for that. It's inspiring, and we continue to learn from you. And I'm very happy to support it. So please continue to bring forward things that we may not think about, because that's important. That's how we shape good policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Clausen.
Thanks very much. So many takeaways from this work. First of all, I just want to thank all of our speakers. So many great comments there, and I'll reflect upon some of those. But Donna, who was one of our last speakers, who emphatically said, no more committees, just get to work. And I take that to heart, and that's certainly, I think, our goal here. And to Mark White, who has been our past OPIAC chair, and his drive on this one. Betty Thompson, one of my favorite mornings in this job so far is spending it with the Dunbar Seniors Cafe, and I look forward to coming and seeing you again. Jenny is here. Some people didn't speak. Allison, Tiffany, I'm really just so happy you're all here to be here for this important work that is coming forward. I want to also thank our staff and as well council members. This sort of came together in a couple of pieces. One was the direction to look at the WHO Age City program and whether we could align our work here or there. And also the idea that we would hire somebody that wouldn't be just sort of sitting kind of directing programming, but really had that whole city approach. And I think we really reeled in a big fish when we brought in Anthony Cooper-Schmidt to take care of that work. And I know that he's working with our entire staff team here, but that whole city approach is, I think, is really going to distinguish Vancouver and really put it ahead of other jurisdictions. There's a mention of UBCM, and I only just want to say this, is that UBCM, for the time that I've been around it, has not been as focused as it can be, and I want them to kind of hear here in this chamber that I do think that certainly in jurisdictions around the province, you're seeing a lot of graying communities there that are going to be struggling, and I think it should be front and center in the conversations we have in this fall's conference if possible. So we know the numbers. We know that we're going to be seeing a lot more older people in the city, and I think that this plan will go to a very, very long way to try and respond to those changes. I also want to underline the remarks first from Kieran regarding ageism, which is determined to be the only acceptable ism, the only kind of discrimination that people still tolerate, and I think it's time that we stop tolerating it. This plan does, in real terms, will mean that we'll be able to support older adults right across our city. It'll make it hopefully more affordable and accessible for housing that comes in here and being able to remain in this neighborhoods that they love. And it also means tackling social isolation head on with stronger community connections and literacy programs. And importantly, it means that family caregivers will also be able to be supported and thrive. I think that's something that really gets missed, is that family caregivers with older parents and other family members to take care of really shoulder a lot of the burden, and hopefully we can work as a community to support them as well. These efforts, whether in accessibility, transportation, housing, social inclusion, will help to shape a city that works better for everyone at every stage of life, and I think that's really key. As we move forward, we should continue to listen to the people who are coming forward to tell us their stories, engaging with our community partners, and ensure that these policies translate into real, tangible improvements. You know, we've seen the tragic consequences of not being able to focus on the seniors in our community. In fact, it was over 600 people that died province-wide during the heat dome, and 100 in the city of Vancouver alone. And that, to me, was such an incredibly painful realization that we had let ourselves down, we'd let our community down because we were not ready to try and make sure that we were engaged with people and making sure that they had places where they could be safe during an incident like that, a climate incident like that. So I just want to say that I'm extraordinarily proud of this work that our team has brought together. It makes Vancouver shine, and it really hopefully will be an example to other jurisdictions right across the country as we all really lean in and remind ourselves that we are an aging demographic. We have a city that has to take care of its seniors and its people, and we've put our best foot forward here. And I just want to really thank again the support of council to move this work forward and our staff for coming up with a great plan. And as Donna says, no more committees. Let's just get to work. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, I'm going to call the vote. So, councillors, please register your vote on the voting panel for this item. Okay, so this report passed unanimously, as you can see from the screen. Thanks everyone for speaking to council. Thanks everyone. All right, so that completes report 2 on the agenda. So the standing committee portion of this meeting is now complete. We will now reconvene in council with Mayor Sim as the chair to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's committee meeting. Okay. Over to you now, Mayor Sim. Okay. There we go.
Thank you very much. So we will now convene in council to deal with the following recommendations and actions from today's standing committee on city finance and services meeting.
I'm sorry, everyone. We're still in council meeting. I'm sorry.
Everyone's excited here. It's all good. I feel like I'm at the float off right now. All right. Okay, clerk, can we please have roll call?
Thanks, everyone. I'm sorry we're still in council meeting, but thanks, everyone.
Mayor Sim is in the chair. Councillor Kirby Young. Councillor Dominato. Councillor Bly is absent. Councillor Fry. Councillor Claassen. Councillor Montague. Councillor Meisner had a leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Joe.
Present.
The meeting has quorum, Mayor Sim.
Great, thank you very much. We need a motion to adopt the committee's recommendations for reports 1 through 4.
So moved.
Great, thank you, Councillor Kirby Young, seconded by Councillor Claassen. All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. Great, the motion carries unanimously. Urgent business. Council, are there any items of urgent business? For instance, are there any leave of absence requests needed prior to the next meeting cycle on February the 25th? A reminder that these requests should be submitted in writing to the clerks through the amendments distribution list. Up here, I do not see. No one's on the queue. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. There's no other items. Okay. Can we please get a motion to adjourn this meeting? Great. Councillor Claassen, seconded by Councillor Joe. All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
All those opposed say nay. Great. The motion carries unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.